I poured millions into protecting my blind son, only to watch, through a nanny cam, as his new caregiver systematically broke him. I thought it was cruelty, but I was wrong. The silence in my mansion is the most expensive thing I own. It's a deep, oppressive quiet that swallows the sound of my own footsteps on the marble floors. I built a tech empire from a garage startup, and now I live in a house so large you could get lost looking for the kitchen. But all the money in the world couldn't buy back my wife's laughter, and it couldn't give my son his sight. My son, Leo, is my entire world. He's 7 years old, with a mind as bright as a supernova, and my late wife Sarah's gentle smile. He was born without sight, a beautiful, perfect boy navigating a world of darkness. After Sarah passed, it was just the two of us against that darkness, and I was failing. I couldn't be the father he needed and the CEO my company demanded. So, I did what billionaires do. I threw money at the problem. I hired the best of the best: tutors, therapists, and nannies. Clara was the latest, and supposedly the greatest. She came with a file of references thicker than my company's IPO prospectus. She was quiet, stern, and efficient. She had degrees in childhood development and special needs education. On paper, she was perfect. For the first few weeks, it seemed like she was. The house ran like clockwork. Leo's educational toys were always neatly arranged. His Braille lessons were on schedule, and he seemed quiet. I mistook it for discipline. I mistook his silence for peace. My first inkling that something was wrong came from the nanny cams. I had them installed when Sarah was sick, just to keep an eye on things. I'd mostly forgotten about them, but one long night in a Tokyo boardroom, I felt a pang of loneliness and decided to check the live feed from the playroom. What I saw made my blood run cold. Leo was trying to get a glass of water from a small table. His hands were searching the surface, patting gently as he'd been taught. I saw Clara, sitting in an armchair just a few feet away, watching him with an unnerving stillness. She didn't move a muscle. Leo's hand fumbled, knocking the glass over. It clattered to the floor, water splashing across the polished wood. Leo flinched, his small shoulders hunching. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the empty air. Clara's voice was clipped, devoid of any warmth. "Clean it up." Leo's face crumpled. "But I can't see the spill, Clara. I need help." She didn't move. "You have hands, you have ears. You can hear where the drips are. You can feel where the floor is wet. Find a towel and clean it up." I watched in horror as my blind son got down on his hands and knees, his small hands patting the cold, wet floor, searching for the edges of the puddle, while the woman I paid a 6-figure salary to care for him simply watched. My first instinct was to call the house, to scream at her through the intercom, to fire her on the spot. But something held me back. I needed to see more. I needed to understand the scope of this cruelty. Over the next week, I became obsessed. I neglected my work, my meetings, my entire empire to become a remote ghost in my own home, watching hours of footage. And it was worse than I could have ever imagined. It was a methodical, psychological torment. One day she moved a chair in the hallway. A small change, but for Leo it was a catastrophe. He'd memorized the layout of the house, his own safe world. I watched him walk confidently down the hall, only to cry out in pain and confusion as he collided with the misplaced obstacle. Clara appeared moments later. She didn't comfort him. She didn't apologize. She simply said, "The world isn't always where you expect it to be, Leo. You must learn to adapt." Another time she took away his audiobook player, his main source of comfort and joy. "You rely on stories too much," she told his heartbroken face. "You need to learn to make your own." Each incident was a fresh stab to my heart. She was systematically dismantling every support structure, every small comfort he had. She was making his world harder, scarier, and lonelier. The fury built inside me like a pressure cooker. This wasn't education. This was abuse. This woman was a monster, hiding behind a placid face and a sterling resume. I booked the first flight home. The entire 14-hour journey, I planned my confrontation. I would not be the distant CEO. I would be a father. I would be a roaring lion protecting his cub. I'd have security present. I would show her the footage, clip by horrifying clip. I would ruin her. She would never work with a child again. I stormed into the house, my heart pounding with a righteous rage. The silence was heavier than usual. I expected to find them in the playroom, in the middle of one of her cruel lessons. I flung the door open, my prepared speech a torrent on the tip of my tongue, ready to unleash hell. But the room was empty. Spotless. The toys were arranged with an almost chilling precision. A cold dread, sharper and more terrifying than my anger, began to seep into my veins. "Leo," I called out, my voice echoing in the vast space. "Clara?" Nothing. I ran through the house, my calls growing more frantic. His bedroom, the garden, the library. All empty. I was about to hit the panic button on my security system when I returned to the playroom and saw it. My blood ran cold. She was gone. And on the table, where she always placed Leo's afternoon snack, was a single folded piece of paper with my name on it. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. My mind was a whirlwind of terrifying possibilities, a ransom demand, a confession, a threat. But the crisp, elegant handwriting on the page was none of those things. It was a judgment. It began without preamble. "You saw cruelty. What you should have seen was a mirror. You have given your son a life of perfect safety, a gilded cage padded with velvet and silence. You've surrounded him with people who anticipate his every need, who clear his every path, who whisper reassurances that the world is soft and predictable. You did this out of love, I know, but your love has become his prison. You are teaching him to be helpless. A blind man who cannot tolerate an unexpected chair in a hallway is a blind man who will never be able to leave his house. A boy who cannot find a towel to clean a spill is a boy who will never be self-sufficient. You hear his audiobooks and you feel comfort. I see an addiction to worlds he can't live in, a substitute for learning to navigate his own. I am not breaking your son. I am forging him. I am giving him the calluses and the resilience the world will demand of him, the resilience your fortune can never buy." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. The rage in my chest didn't vanish, but it was suddenly crowded by a cold, sickening wave of doubt. Had I been so blind myself? In my grief and my guilt, had I been so desperate to protect him from any and all discomfort that I was actually crippling him? I read on, my heart hammering against my ribs. He is safe. He is with me. And he is learning. But now it is your turn. If you want to see your son again, you will do exactly as I say. This is not a negotiation. If I see a single police car, a single private investigator, if I hear a whisper of this on the news, you will never see Leo again. You have built an empire on delegating, on observing from a distance through cameras and reports. Now you will act. You will walk in his world. Your first task is simple. Be at the entrance to the city's public botanical gardens at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Leave your phone, your wallet, and your watch in your car. Take only the key. You will be given your next instruction there. Don't be late." My first instinct was to tear the note to shreds and call my head of security, a man who could find a needle in a global haystack. I could have a dozen teams mobilized in minutes. I could have her face plastered on every news station in the country. I could use the full force of my wealth and power to bring my son home. But her words echoed in my head. "You will never see Leo again." Was it a bluff? Looking back at the footage in my mind's eye, at the cold, calculating precision of her actions, I knew it wasn't. She was not an impulsive woman. This was a plan. This was a meticulously constructed game, and I was now a player. My rage warred with a terrifying sliver of understanding. She was right. I had built him a cage. A beautiful, comfortable, expensive cage. The next morning I felt like a stranger in my own life. I drove my least conspicuous car, a simple sedan I kept for sentimental reasons. I parked a block away from the botanical gardens, the air thick with the smell of exhaust fumes and street food smells I usually only experience through tinted windows. I placed my $1,000 smartphone and my custom-made platinum watch in the glove compartment. It felt like shedding my skin, like amputating the limbs of my power. With nothing but a single car key in my pocket, I walked towards the gardens. The morning rush was in full swing. People bumped past me, a sea of anonymous faces. No one knew who I was. Without my suit, my entourage, my aura of wealth, I was just another man. I felt naked, vulnerable. I stood at the gate at 8 a.m. sharp, my eyes scanning every face in the crowd. Was she watching? Was one of these people her accomplice? A few minutes passed, stretching into an eternity. My anxiety grew with each tick of a clock I could no longer see. Was this a trick? A wild goose chase while she took my son across the country? Just as I was about to give in to the panic and run back to my car, a young girl, no older than Leo, with bright pigtails and a missing front tooth, skipped up to me. She held out a single, perfectly white gardenia. "This is for you," she chirped, her voice clear as a bell. I stared at her, confused. "From who?" I asked, my voice hoarse. She just smiled, a bright, innocent smile that didn't reach her strangely perceptive eyes. "She said you'd know," the girl replied. Then she turned and skipped away, disappearing into the crowd as quickly as she had appeared. My hand closed around the cool, waxy petals of the flower. I brought it closer, and my blood froze. It wasn't just the flower's familiar scent, the same kind Sarah used to have in her private garden. It was the small, almost invisible piece of paper, tightly rolled and tucked deep within its center. With fumbling fingers, I worked the tiny scroll of paper from the heart of the gardenia. The scent of the flower was overpowering, a ghostly reminder of Sarah, and for a moment I felt a dizzying sense of disorientation. The note was written in the same precise, elegant script. The world is full of textures and smells, signals you have forgotten how to read. You see with your eyes, but you are blind to everything else. Your next task is at the old city market on 2nd and Elm. Find the stall that sells spices from a world you've never visited. You will know it by the scent of star, anise, and saffron. Ask the proprietor for saffron for Sarah. He will give you what you need. You have until noon. Do not use a map. Do not ask for directions. Follow your senses. 2nd and Elm, the old city market. It might as well have been on the moon. I hadn't set foot in that part of the city in over a decade. It was a chaotic, sprawling labyrinth of vendors and shoppers, a place my drivers were explicitly told to avoid. The instruction was insane. Find a specific stall based on scent alone? Without a phone, without a map, I was adrift. My instinct, my lifetime of training, was to strategize, to find a loophole. I could walk to the nearest hotel, use their concierge, get a map, call a cab. But her words from the first note echoed. You saw Cruelty. What you should have seen was a mirror. This wasn't just a set of instructions. It was a test, a lesson. Clara was forcing me to step out of my gilded cage and into Leo's world, a world navigated not by sight or technology, but by memory, by touch, by smell. I took a deep breath, trying to push down the panic. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to empty my mind of boardrooms and stock prices. I remembered vague details from years ago. The market was east of here. The sun was rising, casting long shadows. I could feel its warmth on my right cheek. That meant east was that way. It was a start. I began to walk, a man stripped of his armor. The city was a sensory assault. The roar of traffic, the shriek of a distant siren, the smell of roasted nuts from a street cart clashing with the foul stench of a garbage truck. I focused, trying to filter the chaos. I was paying attention to the world in a way I hadn't since I was a broke kid, trying to find my way in a new city. Hours seemed to blur together. I walked for what felt like miles, following the subtle slope of the streets, listening to the sounds change from the manicured hum of the financial district to the boisterous clamor of a residential neighborhood. I made wrong turns. I ended up in dead-end alleys. I was jostled by crowds, ignored by people who would normally scramble to open a door for me. I felt a frustration so profound it was almost comical. I, a man who could move markets with a single phone call, couldn't find a street 2 miles away. Humiliation was a bitter pill, but underneath it, something else was stirring. A grudging respect for my son. This was his every day. Every step outside his room was a journey into the unknown, a test of courage and trust in his other senses. Finally, a new scent cut through the urban grime. A complex, heady mix of spices, roasting meat, and fresh produce. The market. I plunged into the throng, a river of humanity. It was overwhelming. Hundreds of stalls, a cacophony of vendors hawking their wares. Fresh fish! Get your mangoes, sweet mangoes. I closed my eyes again, just as Clara had forced Leo to do. I pushed aside the visual noise and focused on my nose. I smelled leather goods, cheap perfume, fried dough, and then, faintly at first, I caught it. A sharp, licorice-like aroma mixed with something earthy and floral, star anise and saffron. I moved toward the scent, a human bloodhound. It grew stronger, pulling me through the crowd until I stood before a small, dimly lit stall, overflowing with colorful powders and dried herbs in large burlap sacks. An old man with a long grey beard and kind eyes looked up from grinding something in a mortar and pestle. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice accented. My heart was pounding. "I'm looking for saffron for Sarah," I said, the words feeling strange and foreign on my tongue. The man's expression didn't change. He simply nodded, reached under his counter, and pulled out a small canvas pouch tied with a simple string. It was surprisingly heavy. He handed it to me without a word. I took it, my hands shaking slightly. I didn't know what I was expecting. Another note, a key, a clue. I untied the string and looked inside. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a clue. It was a blindfold, made of soft black silk. And tucked inside it was the next note. "You have found your way using one sense. Now you will learn to use the others. Put on the blindfold. Your next destination is the St. Jude's Bell Tower. It chimes every hour. You have until the 3 o'clock chime to get there. From the market, you can hear it if you listen. Trust your ears. Trust your hands. Trust the world will not swallow you whole. Your son is learning this lesson. Now, so are you." This was a new level of insanity. To navigate the chaotic city streets blind? It was impossible. It was dangerous. My rage at Clara flared anew, hot and fierce. She was toying with me, putting me through this humiliating, perilous ordeal. And yet, I thought of Leo, on his hands and knees, feeling for the spilled water in the dark. I thought of him walking into that chair. This was his reality, and for the first time I truly, viscerally understood the terror and the bravery that his small life contained. My hand tightened on the silk. It was a choice. My old life of power and control, or this terrifying new path that might lead me back to my son. Slowly, with the roar of the market deafening my ears and the scent of 1,000 spices in the air, I lifted the blindfold to my eyes. The world went black, and in the distance, carried on the wind, I heard the faint melodic chime of a bell. 1 o'clock. I had 2 hours. Tying the blindfold was an act of surrender. The vibrant chaos of the market vanished, replaced by an overwhelming symphony of sound and sensation. The world, once a visual panorama, became a terrifying, intimate space. The ground beneath my expensive shoes felt uneven, a treacherous landscape of cobblestones and discarded vegetable refuse. The shouts of vendors became directional cues, the rush of air a warning of someone passing too close. Panic clawed at my throat. Every instinct screamed to rip the silk from my eyes, to reclaim the control that had defined my entire existence. But then I thought of Leo. I thought of the quiet courage he displayed every single day of his life. This was my penance, my pilgrimage. I stood still for a long moment, forcing myself to breathe, to listen past the immediate noise, and there it was again, faint but clear, the bell tower. It seemed to come from my left, beyond the main thoroughfare I had come from. My journey began, one tentative, shuffling step at a time. I stretched out a hand, my fingers brushing against the rough canvas of a stall, the cool metal of a cart, the unexpected warmth of a stranger's jacket. Each touch was a point on a map I was drawing in my mind. The smells were my landmarks, the briny tang of the fishmonger, the sweet perfume of the flower stall I'd passed, the greasy aroma of a food stand. People bumped into me. Once I stumbled hard, my hands shooting out to catch myself against a brick wall, the rough texture scraping my palms. There was no apology, just a muttered curse. I was invisible, An obstacle. The humiliation was a fire in my gut, but it was slowly burning away my pride. Time became meaningless. My world was measured in footsteps and heartbeats. I learned to listen to the rhythm of the city. The rumble of a truck was a wall of sound to be avoided. The cheerful chatter of children meant a clear path on a sidewalk. I followed the chime of the bell, a lifeline in the auditory storm. After what felt like an eternity, the sounds of the market faded, replaced by the more predictable hum of a quieter street. The bell was louder now, closer. I could feel the vibrations through the soles of my shoes when it rang for 2 o'clock. I was getting there. My other senses, long dormant, were screaming with information. I could feel the sun on my face, telling me I was heading west. I could smell the scent of old stone and damp earth, the signature of the old church district. Finally, the 3 o'clock chime erupted directly above me, a deafening, glorious peal of bells. The vibrations shook my entire body. I had made it. I was standing on the stone plaza in front of the St. Jude's bell tower. Exhausted, disoriented, but with a strange sense of accomplishment warming my chest, I reached up and untied the blindfold. The sudden flood of light was blinding. I blinked, my eyes watering, as the world swam back into focus. And then I saw them. They were sitting on a bench at the far side of the plaza, bathed in the afternoon sun. Clara was sitting straight and still, watching me. And next to her, holding a long white cane, was Leo. He wasn't crying. He wasn't scared. He was smiling. He turned his head toward the sound of the bell, his face alight with a serene confidence I had never seen before. He looked whole. I started walking towards them, my legs unsteady. My anger, my fear, it had all dissolved on that blind walk, replaced by a profound, aching understanding. Clara didn't stand as I approached. She simply watched me with those unnervingly calm eyes. I stopped in front of them, my throat too tight to speak. Leo's head turned in my direction, his smile widening. "Dad," he said, his voice stronger than I remembered, "you came." I dropped to my knees in front of his bench, ignoring the grime on my $1,000 trousers. I reached out and took his small hand, my thumb tracing the back of it. It felt different, stronger. There were tiny calluses on his fingertips. "I'm here, Leo," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm here." I looked up at Clara. The words of fury I had rehearsed for days were gone. "Why?" was all I could manage to ask. "Because he needed a father, not a warden," she said, her voice soft but firm. "He needed to learn to be brave, and he couldn't do that if his own father was terrified of letting him experience the world. He needed to know that a fall isn't a failure, and that he is capable of getting back up on his own. I had to show you the world he lives in, so you could stop trying to shield him from it, and start teaching him how to navigate it." She reached into her bag and handed me a small, hard-bound book. It was a Braille primer. "This," she said, "is your final instruction. Read it, learn it. Read with your son, not to him." I looked from the book to Leo's radiant face, and finally I understood. Clara's cruelty was a radical, desperate form of love. She hadn't been breaking my son. She had been setting him free. And in the process, she had freed me too. From my guilt, from my fear, from the silent gilded cage I had built around us both. The silence in my mansion had been the sound of an empty life. From that day forward, our home was filled with new sounds. The tap-tap-tapping of Leo's cane exploring a new path to the garden. The rustle of my clumsy fingers tracing Braille letters under his patient guidance. And for the first time in a very long time, the sound of our shared laughter. Clara stayed on. No longer just a nanny, but a teacher, a mentor for both of us. My empire still ran, but I learned to see it for what it was, a tool, not a purpose. My purpose was right here, feeling the world with my son, one scraped knee, one triumphant discovery at a time, no longer blind to the life that was waiting for us in the beautiful, challenging, unpredictable darkness.